So thank you all for joining us today. Today we'll be talking about talent and workforce development. As we go through inflation, and I'm sure that you guys hear the trend all the time that we're bouncing back from COVID. There's been a lot of focus on the economy. One thing that is very important is that, and of course, how the economy looks today, the good outlook of how it looks tomorrow relies heavily on talent and workforce development. I am not a subject matter expert in that area. So we have a lovely esteemed panel who will be sharing their expertise and they're giving value to our conversation. I will allow them to introduce themselves, starting here immediately to my left.
All right, I'm Brad Lacey, President and CEO of the Conway Area Chamber of Commerce.
Amy Whitehead, Chief of Staff, University of Central Arkansas.
Jessica Rollman, Workforce Education and Training at USA Community College out of Monroe.
And I'm Cody Waits. I'm the Director for the Office of Skills Development in the Department of Commerce.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. I feel to introduce myself. My name is Jimmy Warren. I have the pleasure and opportunity to serve here with the conductor as an outreach coordinator, so I'll be moderating the panel today. So jumping right into it, question number one, and we'll just kind of pop it around. If you feel led to answer the question, definitely jump in and give your expertise on it. How do you see entrepreneurial development and workforce development working together?
Well, for us, obviously, my agency is dedicated to doing nothing but developing our workforce in a number of different fashions. And I think, when you look at workforce development, you have to look at it from the entire spectrum, right? So it's not just focusing on adult learners, it's not just focusing on K-12, but it's focusing on career seekers and career changers and those individuals who are at all kinds of different places in the spectrum. And one of the things that we always try to look at is Arkansas growth businesses. And we look at that as 250 employees or less. And so I think if we want to focus on, workforce development, if you look at the numbers and statistics around small businesses, and not only in the state of Arkansas, but across the country, it's drastic as to how many of those companies actually are, from that entrepreneurial spirit. So for us, we invest heavily in small, medium businesses, 250 employees or less, to try to make sure that they're building themselves up and have the resources to not only grow their companies, but also sustain that for a long period of time. We have a dedicated funding stream that's called a Grow Our Own kind of dedicated funding stream that allows for companies to access up to $250,000 a year in reimbursements from the state of Arkansas. And so for any of you out in the room today who may be looking at opportunities to figure out how you can grow your business, or as you develop out something plan, please be sure to reach out to us, because obviously one of the things we want to do is invest in small business here in the state of Arkansas.
I'll add to, from the community college perspective, would say that a big part of ours is it's kind of in two areas. One is we don't necessarily focus on entrepreneurial skill sets, as we are just trying to get skilled persons out in the workforce. However, once you get that business going, then we would be training individuals that can work for you. But then we also have some that come back, and we have a welding student who came through, wanted to open his own business. So he was coming in just really to hone in on his skills a little better, get his welder certifications, things of that nature. And as we do that, students in our credit programs, because workforce development for us is credit and non-credit, they can go on and get degrees in organizational leadership, which is that next level for them then to take their skill set, their trade they've learned, and be able to have the skill set from a 4-year university where they could open their business on that. But then we'll be hopefully training workers.
I think there's so many ways. Like, it's just a given to me that entrepreneurship and workforce development will go hand in hand. I think one of the things that UCA and many of the leaders in our community are dedicated to is talent attraction. And talent attracts talent. And so creating that ecosystem, the conductor is really involved in that. UCA is involved in that. Equipping people with entrepreneurial mindsets and innovative mindsets. So we created new degree programs at UCA around entrepreneurship and innovation, and have that public-private partnership with the conductor. But I think we're really committed beyond those academic degree programs to making sure that we're supporting entrepreneurs and the organizations that are going to support them. So that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. But working with organizations like the Chamber and the city to create a place where entrepreneurs want to live, and then to have the workforce that can really be an asset when they start their business. And that's where we plug in UCA's role.
Yeah, I think I would add to it that the way we look at it is, our largest businesses in town started as a one-person deal or a two-person deal. So whether that was Bob Napoltz in 1949 building a house. And then now they're one of the largest construction companies in America, based here at Conway with 16 or 1,700 employees across the United States. Whether those employees are here physically or in Franklin, Tennessee or Kansas City, it's still building wealth here. It's still building a brand that's based here. And the same thing with Axis. I mean, it started as a segment of the bus company, right? And then spun off on its own and now becomes our largest private sector employer. And, you know, we've been a huge advocate and partner for the conductor from day one, because what we knew was that we needed an entity that focused solely on entrepreneurship, because the needs of entrepreneurs are very different than those of other businesses that we might normally work with. And I really mean really startups, because their needs are extremely different. And an example, the reason this facility is so important and we pushed for that is what we saw time and time again were these companies that would start maybe out of the garage or out of the home. And then they would get to this point where they needed a physical location, but we really didn't have anything that didn't require a lot of their capital. And so we were pushing, we were trying to help people find these locations that didn't exist. And an example I'll give you would be Tacos for Life. When that business grew to a point that the corporate side didn't fit in a restaurant anymore, we were trying to help them find a place, and there really was no place for them to sort of grow, you know, from a 3-person shop to a 6-person shop to a 10-person shop. And so the beauty of this place, especially upstairs, is I think we'll see this place full of companies like that are in various stages of growth, and then they'll go on to be the next Naples.
Yeah, just on that note, I mean, it's exactly right. What Brad said, I mean, you look at just all the entrepreneurs, I mean, those are the ones who create job opportunities, right? I mean, without that, you know, then you're gonna have a lot of individuals here in Arkansas and elsewhere that aren't gonna have the same opportunities as they would have without that entrepreneurial spirit. So without that person going and starting that business, you're not gonna have the opportunity to grow, right? Hire more people. With hiring more people comes training individuals. Training individuals makes themselves more marketable to themselves, to other employers, allows them to become economically more stable. And so from the base of it all, you know, entrepreneurship really drives that innovative spirit, and that growth in employment numbers drives down our unemployment numbers and creates opportunities for all.
Thank you. Brad, I definitely want to shout out the Chamber just for always being innovative, and especially on the recently announced award of Chamber of the Year. One way that you've shown innovation is recently hiring a team member specifically aimed at talent development. Can you talk a little bit about that initiative and what you foresaw going into that?
Yeah, so, you know, we knew that we needed to get more serious about talent development, and we looked for feedback from a lot of our larger employers on what was missing. And so there are a few programs that we're pushing forward. One that's happening right now is in partnership with UCA called Launch Conway. And the idea was that we want to keep the best and brightest of our kids here and give them a reason to stay. I mean, it's almost like a leadership course for these up and coming juniors and seniors, so that they understand what is available here, not only from a employment standpoint, but the first group we met with, they were very interested in life skills. I mean, they were very interested in, should I get a credit card? What do I do to sign a lease? How do I know if it's time to buy a house? And then what does that look like? And so, you know, we're kind of going to run the gamut with these students from UCA on life skills training to here's the opportunities that exist in the market, so that when they do graduate, hopefully they already have a job and we keep them here, because we have an advantage that most communities don't have, in that we have all these kids graduating. And it's really been our growth narrative for the last 25 years is we're this town where a substantial number of kids never leave. And we have to be more focused on that. But then I also think that, you know, talent looks different to different groups of people. And I know there's a question about diversity there. One thing that we're also doing through that position is taking our Indian population in the city and really talking through what is missing here. What we found, and I think in the South, we really kind of find ourselves when we think about diversity of being Black and white, but it's really much broader than that. And so we took a focus group pre-pandemic of Indian, primarily programmers from Axiom and at the time DXC, which is now Gankwell. And we said, tell us, some of them live here, some of them chose to live in Little Rock. And we said, why, if you don't live here, why don't you live here? And food, and not restaurant, grocery store food. Most of the food that is important to their culture is not available for purchase in our community. So they are going to Little Rock to Indian grocery stores to buy that. And so we went as far as Corey went on a shopping trip with them and took pictures of everything that's missing. And then we started working with Harps because it's easier because they're based in Arkansas, they're smaller. And they've frankly, I think, done a pretty good job at Tin Box with the Hispanic community of stocking grocery items. And they're very open to expanding that Indian grocery section. Cricket, trying to develop a cricket league in town. Cultural activities that are important to them. And so I think often we think about talent as being matching jobs to people and skills or whatever, but it's much more than that. And so I use that Indian example as, we could have the best salaries, we could have the best of everything, but if you can't go to the grocery store and buy the food that's important to you and your family, you're not going to live here. And so that's also a part of talent, is making sure that your community is welcoming these people across the board, regardless of where they're from or what their life experience is like. I mean, I try to put myself in their position and think about how much I love cheeseburgers and fried chicken. And what if I moved to a place and neither one of those things were available? How would I feel? So,
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Amy, I'm coming to you. I want to kind of segue off of Brad's point around talent and diversity. Being at UCA, when we talk about higher education, what comes to mind immediately when you hear those two words together, talent and diversity?
Thanks for the question. I think that we see such a broad cross-section of students that do go out into the community and hope they create a home here. But we've got to make them feel comfortable in our community. Like Brad said, the community of UCA itself, that's their home and that's where they're going to spend a lot of their time. And so we have really intentional efforts to try to meet the needs of a really diverse student body that we have. And so that just looks, there's so many different ways we do that. But I think there's also a recognition that for our own workforce, we have to mirror what our student population looks like. And so that has been a challenge at times to be able to have a workforce that really reflects our student body. And it's one that we're going to have to keep working on. We've also been challenged by the state and others to look at our minority vendor partnerships. And Christy Harder is here and she's worked on that a lot. And so we want to be a good steward of those public dollars and make sure that it's a place where all people belong and we create a community where everyone feels included. And that we're also doing what we need to do to work with vendors. And maybe a lot of those are minority vendors in the state. So I know Christy's been recognized for those efforts. So thank you, Christy. So that's a really challenging question because there's so many directions I could go with it. But I will say, just back to your first question on how we approach workforce and entrepreneurship, we're trying to think entrepreneurial ourselves as an institution as well. It's not just about imparting that on our students, but embodying innovation and entrepreneurship. And so over the past 2 years, you've seen us develop a lot of new programs to try to meet the demand for the workforce in the marketplace. So that's going to be data analytics. That's going to be our Arkansas Coding Academy, computer engineering. It's going to be cybersecurity in our cyber range. We're gonna beef up, logistics and supply chain, and we've seen how important that is during COVID. And so just thinking more entrepreneurial, with a more entrepreneurial mindset as we develop those programs. Part of that has to do with our industry outreach. So bringing those companies in and letting them tell us directly what they need and getting them connected directly with students. So it's not just Launch Conway, we're working officially with students, it's also got to be working with our local employers to figure out what they need to make sure there's not a mismatch. But having a culture and community where everyone feels like they can thrive. So it's not just matching people to jobs, but it's like Brad said, it's that culture and community that you have to create.
Thank you, thanks. I want to ask this question because even on job applications, I've seen people asking for entrepreneurial spirit. And we've seen, I think this is especially as a millennial, we've seen the age of the side hustle. So how are you cultivating, this is for everybody, how are you cultivating that entrepreneurial spirit within your own workplace?
A lot of my folks have side hustles. And I think it's great. I mean, I own real estate. I started buying real estate in 2005. I did so because the people that I saw who were older, who were successful, financially secure, had done that. And so I thought, well, why don't I do that? So I don't necessarily consider that a side hustle, but it probably is. But I mean, I have folks that, have podcasts and contract out their services, and I mean, they're wonderful employees. To imagine that you can't do both is pretty dumb, I think.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, I mean, being in state government, right, I'm somewhat limited on the amount of side hustles I can. Would love to have a number of them right now, I can assure you, that would probably be pretty beneficial, but certainly encourage my team to go out and do that. I mean, whether it's freelance, I mean, we invest heavily in the education and upskilling of our individuals so they can go out and make themselves more marketable. Sometimes the state government, right, we can't pay the most competitive wages, just is what it is. And so I always try to find ways in which, whether it's my communications director, go out and find yourself some training, whether that's at a two-year community college, a LinkedIn Learning, a for-profit private entity. Let us invest in you. Yes, it will benefit the agency itself, but it's also going to benefit you. You mentioned podcasts, right? We're about to launch a podcast. That experience for her and being able to develop those skill sets is something she hasn't really done. I mentioned her to be able to go and help build out a website. And so those are things that she'll be able to take with her, moving forward. We have another individual on our team who has kind of a coaching gig on the side, right? Where she's been able to use her expertise as an instructor, as a teacher, and her work with the agency to build relationships and partnerships that now after she retires here in about another 2 months, she'll be able to go out and do some other things for herself as well and build a business. So, for us in state government, sometimes what we can do is limited, but we can always find ways in which we can invest in our people so that they can go out and make themselves more marketable. And again, I always encourage our staff to figure out ways in which you can invest in yourself, because this isn't probably going to be your long-term job. So we want to make sure we set you up for success after you leave as well.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to start. Kevin mentioned it's kind of difficult and a little bit of a challenge. I don't want to say we don't cultivate it. We support it more than cultivate it, probably. As he said, in government, we can't pay great wages. So faculty come in, we're about 50-50 with students who will transfer. And then the other 50% are going to be in learning a skill or a trade, and that's not counting the non-credit workforce stuff that we do. There's another 500 students or so with that. But those instructors for the technical trades, they're not enough faculty. So they've got a fourth of the year that they can do some other things, and they're coming in making about a third of what they could make if they stayed in the industry. So we do support them in their non-contract time to continue to run a business and do some side gigs, side hustles per se. It's easier for the faculty because they're on contracts. The staff, it's a little more difficult in that because of being a government agency, but definitely support them where there's not a conflict of interest and that it's allowable through all the policies and stuff that are out there.
I will say we'll be coming to the audience here shortly. If you have any questions, so if you think of something, write it down. We will be taking questions from the audience. I want to ask this.
Hey, one thing I did want to say about that side hustle deal, a long time ago, I've read that a real sign of a healthy startup community is a community where other businesses become the first customer of somebody that's trying to come up. And, you know, we saw an ability to do that with Adina when Adina was growing sort of this side hustle, and she was at this place where she felt like she was gonna have to make a choice that maybe she didn't want to make and risk some stability with us versus go out on her own. And so we just said, well, what if you don't have to choose? Like, what if we sign a contract and become your first customer of your business, and then that gives you the freedom to go get other customers, and then, you know, eventually we worked ourselves out of being customers because she got better customers. But I don't think that was wrong. I mean, I think that was what her dream was, and if we could be a part of helping her get there, then why wouldn't we do that?
And for those who don't know, Adina White, behind the Black Belt Voices podcast, she was actually talking about a phenomenal woman that's done amazing things in the community. And quick plug, she'll actually be here September 21st, and she'll be talking a little bit about her startup story and her journey. So I invite everybody in next week to come hear about that. A quick question that I want to ask to everyone is, how does the community aid and influence talent recruitment?
I think you heard a little bit about what Brad was speaking about earlier. You know, I mean, that's kind of why we get the accolades they do, is that outside the box thinking, and finding those individuals and knowing those community members and having those stakeholder conversations. And yes, that's one piece of it. But having that community buy-in, that community involvement, that community investment is something from a state level we look at and say, well, that's a place we want to help prop up as well. I mean, communities have to be willing to invest locally in their own workforce, in their own talent development skill sets, and things of that nature, because just the state itself can't just go and fully support every community in the state. So where you see those investments, where you see those communities that are really driving these initiatives, really driving these passionate, you know, from K-12 through the community college system, through the four-year university system, all the way through, you know, organizations like the Coding Academy and everything else that's happening here in Conway. You know, we look at that from our perspective, and that's a place we want to continue to do business too, and figure out ways in which we can drive and help build that economy and help build that workforce. You know, so from our perspective, that's something we look at, and we strongly encourage every community in Arkansas to the best of their ability to be able to do. Not everyone's given the resources or the location or the benefits they have, but how do we find that thing that we can use and we can leverage to help build up that community and let us support that effort?
I think there's a general recognition in the state that having an institution of higher education in your community is a good thing for your community. And you're really blessed here to have 3 institutions of higher education. But we are mindful of public perceptions of higher ed. And so the news stories that I'm bombarded with right now as an administrator are perceptions around affordability and the national debate we have on student loans and what's appropriate there. Perceptions of higher ed in general by the public, which have in some quarters been decreasing for a variety of reasons. And so we have to continually tell our story about the impact we're making on workforce and on the economy. We recently did an economic impact study that showed that ECA had a $1.01 billion economic impact on the state of Arkansas. And so I think it's important that while there are appropriate ways to say, you know, how are you passing on costs to students? What are you able to do for the local economy? Just realizing that ECA does have that impact, I think, is important. And we've always felt really supported by this particular community, so that's been really good. We have to continue to demonstrate our value, though, because students want that, parents want that, policymakers want that, and so we're gonna do that.
I think too, we would look at the war. So we believe we're in a war for talent. The places that win the war for talent are going to be the economically successful places in America. And if you win the war for talent, it's because you're the place people want to live. You know, I mean, if you go back into the 1950s, people moved to where the jobs were. And Arkansas was the poster child of that. I mean, we hemorrhaged people in the 1950s. They left, there were almost 300,000 people that left the state to go primarily to Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, because the jobs were there. So the people follow the jobs. Now the jobs follow the people. So if you don't have the people, they're not coming. And that's why, you know, you will see us be outspoken advocates and push on things like the $25 million grant for trails. That was a 4-year process that we went through, but we were successful. That's why things like these hanging baskets matter. It's why the brick sidewalks, the crosswalks they're putting downtown matter. Everything matters if you are going to be the city that attracts talent. And if you don't think you're competing against folks in other places, you are, especially with remote work. If people can choose where they want to live because they're not bound by a geography, then you better be a really nice place in order for those people to choose you. And then, you know, I often tell this story. We had a prospect that was looking at Conway, and the decision makers in economic development are not looking as much like me anymore and looking like a lot of you. There was a company that was looking here, and the guy who was going to make the decision was originally from Pakistan. And so I sort of developed this rapport with him today, looking at different buildings and whatnot. The end of the story is they didn't come here because the building didn't work. But the story I'm going to tell you, I think, is really important. So toward the end of the day, he said, could I get in the car with you and have a very honest conversation? I said, sure. So he gets in and we're driving to the next stop. And he said, I only have one question. I said, lay it on me, you know. And he said, will I fit in here? I mean, that's a site location decision for major investment in major job growth. Will I fit in here? And so I always tell that story generally to other communities when they talk about, you know, why have we been successful? But if you can't answer that question, yes, you're in trouble. You know, if that person from Pakistan who wants to put $60 million into your community and 300 jobs, if he and his family can't walk down the street and feel like they're a part of this place, then we're not winning. And it's going to increasingly look more like that and less like someone that looks like me making that decision. And so that's just the reality of where we are in the world today.
I want to stay on the video piece. I love that because that's where my brain's going as far as we consider ourselves a community college. We're a community college in the midst of 4 universities on each side of us. But Conway has always like made us feel like we fit in here. We tell Corey and Jimmy all the time.
You're our 2 year school.
We are your
That's what we
school.
say.
Exactly.
You're our 2 year school.
So, I love that. And it really is true. And I would say that is a big part. It's just like, we have to invest in our people. We have to invest in our communities. And it's the backwards. They invest in us. They have plain vests as our their own. And so I'm really about your people and the community and the schools working together and building those relationships with businesses, with chambers. It's going to be just a community effort as a whole.
And that's a good segue. I do want to spend a little time to talk about higher education. I'll come to you first. UACCM has a new workforce center. Can you share a little bit about that and what you guys foresee going into that?
Yeah, so Workforce Training Center technically been open. We did our grand opening in 2018. It's over 53,000 square feet. Currently it houses 4 degree programs for industrial maintenance, mechanics, welding, HVAC, and auto service. And then we also have the non-credit workforce development office there. And we are the state's only American Welding Society accredited testing facility. And so it's a building, it's a facility, but it's built because of our relationships with business and industry and things that we've worked with them over the years. We always say that building would not exist without business and industry partnerships. The programs would not exist if you ever tour our building, or some of you have, because I've talked to a couple of you already this morning. Everything in there, it's about those relationships and the trainings that we provide to get workers, skilled laborers into their positions to upskill. We have a lot of programs that we run on the non-credit side where we're upskilling, so that, I mean, that's just open other jobs, entry-level jobs as we upskill on that. Have a 5,000 square foot space that's open for business and industry coming to do trainings or events and postings. So we really try to be whatever we need to be. My motto is, with business and industry in particular, is if I can't provide it, let me figure out how to provide it. Call Cody a lot of times sometimes. So, but it really is like we work with business and industry to provide what you need. That is our focus. What can we do for you to help you upskill employees, to help you bring in new talent, to help you grow your business? I sat down with Saul Miller in Arkansas. They're all over the nation. But they were struggling in the state with keeping people. And so something that we don't typically do. But we created a whole professional development plan for them, for their state employees. And so now when they hire someone, they know exactly what they have to do to grow. So we're always looking for ways that we can meet their needs. You just have to know to come to us and say, I have this need. And we can help you with that. So, I don't know if that answered everything.
That was great. Amy, I'm coming to you, and it's kind of a two-parter. Earlier, you alluded about the entrepreneurial degree that UCA offered, and I was going to ask if you could just kind of share what all that entails. And I know that wasn't on the script, but I did want to hear just for myself kind of what goes into that entrepreneurial degree. And then I just wanted to know about the role of higher education in workforce and talent development.
Sure. I'm gonna take the second part of your question first, because I really can't speak too much to the Innovation Entrepreneurship Program. It's in the College of Business, and it works very closely with the conductor. The conductor actually does a lot of programming on our campus in terms of visioning and planning for our various departments, the health sciences boot camp for people interested in entrepreneurship and mental health sciences. And so there's a lot of crossover between our innovation and entrepreneurship programming and a lot of what you all teach here at the conductor. Where we're focused for workforce development, we have two big projects that you've probably seen if you've driven by our campus. We have an integrated health sciences building, and that's really a direct response to the demand for health sciences graduates. And so we are able to increase our nursing program quite a bit. We were really bound by the actual amount of space that we had to let students into those degree programs. And if you were at North Metro Healthcare Awards, you probably heard they had a panel like this talking about workforce challenges. They need to hire. And so we're trying to meet that demand. We also have the Wingate Center for Fine and Performing Arts. We received a $20 million grant to build that building. And we're really trying to be a hub for the arts in Arkansas. And once students walk through that building and see what UCA and this community have to offer for the arts, it's going to attract so many more people, or have so many more people take a second look at Conway as a home to really grow in the arts. And our community embraces that in a lot of ways off campus, but the Wingate Center will be where the Conway Symphony Orchestra will be performing. We'll have a lot more public performances there. We will have the Arkansas two really visible ways that we're looking at workforce development. But we also have other ways like non-credit or certificate programs. I mentioned the Coding Academy and Allison Fish this year. We're seeing, just talking about diversity, more women, more diverse participants in that than we've ever seen, more growth in enrollment. And so Allison is really meeting with all those industry partners to say, we can get you skilled individuals in a short period of time. Let us tailor our curriculum to meet your needs. And those individuals are being hired and they're ready to go. And our alumni from that program are now helping us recruit and hire even more people into the Coding Academy. So thanks to Allison and Chanel Eagley, she's here from UCA over our Division of Outreach and Community Engagement. They are also focused on those non-credit resources for our community. And I've worked with Cody some over the years to provide that training to our businesses and just people who want to develop those soft skills to be more employable. So there's just a lot of different ways. I mentioned some others earlier with data sciences and technology. I could really go on, but I'll say that entrepreneurial thinking is something we're trying to do throughout the whole institution so that we can meet the needs of our workforce.
Thank you. I have one final question before we go to the audience. If you all have questions, it's not on script, so I apologize for catching everyone, but it is a question that I want to make sure that considering, especially when we talk about talent and entrepreneurship. Who's your favorite Kardashian?
Like, why is it Courtney?
But so I'm not an economic development guy, and I'm sure that we have a lot of audience members who aren't. But what can ordinary people in the community do? People who are just normal citizens. How can we get involved and help, whether it be an educational institution, a chamber of commerce, or even a workforce center, or place in higher education? What can we do to help you in these two arenas?
I can't answer on the Kardashians. I don't know. I know very little about them.
That one was.
But I will say skilled trades, this is what we do. How to help us, how to get involved, is just continuing what we're doing. I mean, it's building relationships. You know, we get a lot, we have all ages. Our programs are full of about 60%, not quite, that's high school, and the other 45% are non-traditionals that are coming back. But just continue to spread the word. Like, if you've never visited your institutes of higher ed, that you do that. Find out what all we can offer. We find huge disconnects sometimes just because it's hard for us to get to everybody and tell you what we can do there. But higher ed is here to serve you guys. We love to teach the trades. We love to create skills. And as she said, in short times, there's a ton of things we can do in very short trainings that can get people out there and get them jobs. Tell your nieces, your nephews, your kids. You know, we've had this big push over the years to get away from the skilled trades. But if you haven't really visited that arena in a while, it is high technology. It is clean. It is not the dirty jobs of the past. And just help us to get the word out that these skilled trades are needed. If we don't keep those positions full, if you look around, everything around you has been touched by a welder or a manufacturing plant. We've got to get people in these trades, construction, and just learn more about those and help them know the skilled trades again, so that we can keep our workforce growing and keep them.
And I'll just say, like, one way that the community can support us is, like, you're part of our community, and we're seeing transfer agreements at a high right now. I mean, our transfer agreements and the number of transfer students that we're seeing has really been notable this year. So some of them are going directly into the job market, but some of them are coming to us. And so there's a really symbiotic relationship between our two-year institutions in Central Arkansas, particularly UACCM, UCA. And so support for that partnership and that relationship is really important.
Just, if I can add real quick, what a lot of might not realize is we have the Bears Partner Program. So actually, and over our biggest population of students in Mount Crawford County, so that's part of why we consider Dobbs College. But we have a partnership. If they know they're going to go to UCA after they get their 2 years with us, UCA considers them a student already, and they can participate in everything that the UCA students can participate in and get involved there. And so that is a huge thing that if you're not aware, they can save a little money 2 years with us and then get transfer scholarships to access the library and just anything with the campus. So,
I would go into, the average citizen is extremely important, and I would get down into the way you vote is very important. Like, we have spent 25 years, in my opinion, building a top-notch city based on good public policy. And that has been because we elect people to city council and mayor's office that want to push this place forward and do things that are a little outside the box. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we had a group of about 20 people that flew in from a city that I will not name, but you would be surprised at the city that was coming here to learn from us on how we built the city. I mean, we have 31 miles of striped bike lanes on city streets. That's pretty rare anywhere, but in Arkansas, it's very rare. It all weaves together into this story of a place that's progressive, that's inclusive. It's all of these things that are important to business today. And so I would say, you know, do business with local business. I mean, that's what chambers have been based on for 200 years. When a new restaurant opens up, flood them with business. I mean, you know, I hear people say we need more restaurants, we'll then go eat out. Like, help them get open. And if you have a bad experience the first time, give them a second chance or a third chance. You know, do business with one another. That is critically important, because when we take people through the middle of the city that aren't from here and they see a viable downtown that is full of small businesses, it says something about what this place is. And a lot of that has to do with the direction that comes out of City Hall. And so the most important thing you can do is be engaged, know what the issues are, show up, vote, and ensure that we keep moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, I mean, that was gonna, I wouldn't say be informed, I mean, not just locally, but from a statewide level as well. I mean, we've had some of the largest investments in the history of the state of Arkansas take place in the most recent months, and probably half of us in the room may not even know what it was, right? I mean, there's 140,000 square foot training facility, 2 of them down here in the state of Arkansas. We're hopefully gonna bring one here locally to the center area right here in Conway. But how many of you knew about those facilities existing and what their missions are, what their priorities are, similar to what we have with UACCM and their workforce training center down the road here? That was the first one that really kind of started this mentality of we need to invest in our K-12 education, career tech ed. And now you see that spiral, but being able to be informed allows us to know what's happening, what's going on, so we can make those right decisions, whether it's going to the polls or whether it's being involved in those local community engagement, practices and things of that nature. So, and then obviously lastly, join your local chamber of commerce, right? So, something fun there for Brett.
Thank you. Awesome. Do we have any audience questions?
Brad, you told a story about someone who asked if they would fit in here. I'm curious how you answered that question.
Yeah, so, good question. I answered that I thought that he would, and I did not stop there. And, I think being a college town is such an advantage when it comes to issues of diversity. I mean, that's where a lot of the fight has always come from. Go back to the 1960s. And I think that, especially what UCA brings is, you have students from how many countries? 90, 80. I mean, there are multiple languages being spoken. And again, I think in the South, generally, when we think about diversity, we get kind of stuck on black, white. It's really much different than that. I mean, there are Black students at UCA who are from Africa, who speak different languages. And so, that always helps in answering that question, that there is a diverse community here. Can it be better? Absolutely. As we learned from the Indian community that, they can't even buy groceries here. Well, that's the problem. So I'm always very honest that we have work to do, but I do think that you'll find a place here,
Anyone else have a question? Comment they want to share?
I'm wondering now, so an entrepreneur that has started a small business and they've been running it all themselves and they're mildly successful, how do they go about when they're figuring out when to hire their first employee? Can anybody comment on how people make those decisions?
Ed, did you just hire the person? Take it away.
3 weeks ago, I did. When the pain becomes too great, it's time to get somebody in there to help. And if you just find yourself not able to get everything done you need done, that's what I did. And there was just enough money, just enough. So there's that answer.
I mean, I think we always look at when our profitability, and our performance aren't aligning, right? Whether it's from a private sector perspective or a public sector perspective. I mean, we look internally at what we're doing, and sometimes you can grow too fast, right? So then you're like, okay, well, now I'm not leveraging my individuals to the most of their capabilities. But there's that fear of, okay, well, is my bottom line going to be impacted by the increase in cost of my personnel? And I just always look at it from my previous life of, outside of state government, which was, is my performance and my customer service and everything else being impacted because I'm too concerned about the profitability metric over here, and am I willing to make that investment? So, I mean, I think to each and every entrepreneur, that's a decision you just kind of have to make in your gut and on your own, and trusting yourself in that nature. But I always look at performance, profitability, and where those two align.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that, I was gonna say after Ed kind of said is, I'm all about lifelong learning. So if you got a skill set missing that you can get trained on and learn and do, awesome. But if it's not, and it's time to take it to another level and you need that new skill set, I'm all about hiring the experts. I know my limits, and I'm not afraid to be able to say, this is my limit, and I need to bring someone else in that can take it to the next level and help me grow there. So that's just one part of my side of it.
And I think you have to be willing to risk. And you have to look at that revenue model that you have. I know for us, we're a little bit different than a lot of chambers that we don't get a big public contract. Most chambers start out with $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $1 million from city government. We have zero. And we did that on purpose because we want to be entrepreneurial, because if we're not worth the investment of that business community, then we probably shouldn't exist, because that's who we're here to serve. And so the way we've grown is we get to this point where we think we see an opportunity, and we really think through that. Is that revenue out there? Can we kind of prove that to ourselves? But then you have to jump.
Yeah.
You know, and so what we've always done is we jump, we hire the person, and that person either directly or indirectly creates the revenue to not only pay for them, but to move the organization forward enough to make that next jump. And so we've seen ourselves, you know, our organization grow from 6 employees to 18 over the last 15 years by making those strategic jumps. But it's always a risk. It's always a risk.
I think if you even look up the definition of entrepreneurship, I think you find 3 words, right? Business, risk, and profits. I mean, I was reading about this last night on my flight back to Little Rock, and you know, if you find yourself standing on the line with 1 foot in and 1 foot out, make the decision one way or the other, because you'll never grow, or you'll go one way or the other, you know, but make the decision, stick with it.
That's what's in the back.
Yeah, so first I just want to thank all guys for your time. So my question was, when y'all mentioned data sciences and technology, I was wondering what new technologies y'all have your eyes on and what y'all are focusing on.
Well, we obviously have our cyber range, and so we're training a lot on cybersecurity. We're also looking at the cross section of health sciences and data. And so Gainwell is a private sector partner that really, you know, that's an example of a company where we're seeing that intersection between technology and healthcare. So we're trying to get that as a niche as well. Robotics is another area that we're heavily investing in, having some success with our robotics team at UCA. And then we're trying to be interdisciplinary. So our natural science and mathematics college is working closely with our college of business, and both of them offer concentrations in data analytics. And that is an area of high need. I would also defer to Allison to talk a little bit about some of the platforms and skill sets that she's hearing about from information technology sector.
Yeah, so cybersecurity is huge right now, and I was just at UACCM. Your facility is amazing. It's beautiful. And there's so many jobs out there right now. A lot around cybersecurity. We train full stack developers. And then Walmart's really going after a lot of data scientists.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that, right? So I mean, going back to that informed discussion, how many of you are aware of the U.S. Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship's 120-day cyber sprint challenge? Probably nobody, right?
Oh, yeah, that's what I called yesterday.
You were on the call yesterday. There you
Yes.
go. So that's what I was going to say is yesterday we had what we called an employer accelerator, where we had over 153 participants from the state of Arkansas, and maybe a handful who snuck in from outside the state, but that's okay. We're doing things better than most around that area. But we did that in coordination with companies like Walmart, Arvest Bank, a little small startup business up in Northwest Arkansas. I'm not going to call them small anymore, but Breach Fits, right? So everywhere from your largest of the large employers to small, medium businesses who have a need in talent for IT, cybersecurity, full stack, front end, back end, whatever have you. And the conversation really yielded around, you know, these companies need talent. You know, Walmart today actually is about to launch a UX apprenticeship program. You may not have the skills today, right? But if you wanted to work remote, move to Bentonville, we want you to stay in Conway, Brent. But, you know, if you want those opportunities, you can get those opportunities, and you don't have to have the 4-year degree at this point in time. You don't have to have 2, 3, 4, 5 years of experience in order to get that job. You can go through an apprenticeship, and that's what this whole DOL sprint was. And so we had these employers when they're talking about those opportunities and why they're doing this, and looking at these non-traditional ways of hiring, right? You know, you go look at those job postings today, they say, well, great, I need 4 years of experience. That's not for me. I don't have that. I just got my computer science degree. Well, now companies realize that we can't find the 4 or 5 year experienced person, so now we're going to have to grow them internally. So we've heavily invested in an organization called the Arkansas Center for Data Sciences. who partners with the Coding Academy as well as ourselves on trying to train people. So one of the things I would just mention to you is if you're looking at an IT occupation and trying to figure out what employers are hiring across multiple different occupations, go to their website, acds.co, and you can find out about companies who are hiring both locally right here in Conway, Central Arkansas, and across the state. They can connect you with that, do a full-blown assessment of where you're at on the spectrum and connect you with employers for employment today. And so that's one of the things we've been doing, and we're really excited about that opportunity.
Cody, I have a question. Can you talk a little bit more about the state's plan for broadband workforce development?
Sure.
Being that, you know, I know that we have infrastructure dollars coming down to reinforce the broadband efforts in the state. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, the state's heavily invested in broadband, hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts going out to those to go and lay the fiber, right? But one of the things we recognized a long time ago was it's going to take us ages to get the fiber laid because we don't have the workers who want to be able to do it, whether it's high voltage line workers, whether it's underground directional drilling, right? Or whether it's tower climbers. And so what we did, just announced it recently, the governor did a press release on the fact that we invested about $3.2 million in 3 locations around the state, one of which is UACC Morrilton, ASU Three Rivers down in Malvern, and UA Cossatot, thank you. I was drawing a blank. And, you know, we're going to be doing the underground piece at UACCM. We're going to be doing the tower climber piece at ASU Three Rivers, and UA Cossatot's going to focus on the high voltage kind of aerial component to that. And so we're covering the costs of instruction. There's a core set of skill sets that have to be developed. And so we found kind of a core set of 40, 60 hours, something along those lines that have to be relevant across all 3 of those skills. And then individuals will have the opportunity to enroll at each of those institutions to be able to kind of get the more technical, customized focus point on whichever path they choose to. You know, if it's an individual who perhaps is in Forest City, Arkansas, right, but they have a passion for this, I think what we'll end up doing is making that core content available online through some sort of virtual mechanism so that people can have advantage of it. But for the technical piece to it, we're going to try to figure out ways in which we can fund transportation, childcare, housing while they're in in those programs, because we want this to be able to serve all people, not just those within a 30-40 mile radius of where those locations are, but be able to figure out ways so that if I'm a student in Blytheville, Arkansas, I can find my way to Morrilton for the training, stay in Conway, right? Be able to have the benefits of everything here in the infrastructure in place, and still be able to get those skill sets to go work for an employer like Klossmeyer or Aristotle or Windstream or whoever it may be.
Thank you all for joining us today. Panelists, thank you so much for taking this time to sit with us as well with wisdom and knowledge. Especially thank you for sharing things that we can do as citizens to stay involved. So again, thank you everybody for joining. Make sure that you follow for more conductive events like this that will be coming, and look forward to seeing you in the future.